This week's Parsha Terumah starts off with a very interesting pasuk. Daber el bnei Israel, speak to the children of Israel, v'ikchu li terumah, and they shall take from me a donation. Me'et kol ish asher yidavenu libo, from each person who his heart impels him, tikchu et terumati, take my donation. This sounds like that there are two competing and contradicting ideas that are being expressed within this pasuk. On the one hand, the expression, take from me a donation, sounds like it is assessing a tax on the people. It is describing a proactive action. Moshe was not to wait for donations to appear, but to actively seek them, and even, according to some commentators, to compel people to contribute if the donations were not forthcoming. On the other hand, from each person whose heart impels him, seems to imply that the donation must be voluntarily given, both if to give and how much to give. But can the donation be considered to be voluntary if Moshe was to actively collect money from the people, even involuntarily? The Torah starts this pasuk with the word daber, daber el bnei Israel. In Parashat Yitro, we learned that there are two words that can be used when instructing to relay a message to others. Daber, speak, and emor, say. As we see from the translation, emor is a gentler instruction, while daber has a stronger and more forceful connotation. Daber, however, does not mean that it needs to be said aggressively, but to speak convincingly and with confidence. So who then was needed to be convinced? To begin with, God needed to convince Moshe of his new role. Until now, Moshe had been functioning as a leading prophet of God, the Redeemer, the lawgiver, the teacher, the chief justice, etc. God now appointed Moshe to also be the official tabernacle fundraiser. This required a completely different skill set than all of his previous roles, perhaps demanding from Moshe something that he had no background in and way out of his comfort zone. Keep in mind that he had been raised as a prince and to be a leader, not a fundraiser or campaigner. Likewise, Moshe's new task to fundraise now required him to convince Israel to donate money to the building and upkeep of the Mishkan. One of the hardest things to do is to convince a person to part with their money, even though it might be for a worthy cause. A person spends many hours hard at work to earn that money, and now they're being asked to voluntarily separate themselves from their hard-earned money? As such, Moshe needed to approach Israel with all of his powers of persuasion to convince Israel to donate. However, just convincing to donate wasn't enough. The command from the text was for Moshe to convince Israel to such an extent that the people would voluntarily want to donate materials and money without even needing to be additionally prodded. Even though the commandment was to be persuasive, we see from the Torah that neither Moshe nor Israel truly needed to be convinced, as both fulfilled their parts with love and enthusiasm. In contrast to the burning bush, where it took a while to convince Moshe to take on the role of God's messenger and prophet, Moshe happily complied with God's directive to fundraise for the building of the Mishkan. As well, when the call went out to bring the materials to start building, the people voluntarily brought more than enough materials. As such, we can say that the pasuk is not about contending with an internal contradiction, but more about attesting to the nature of people. While it might take some effort to convince and persuade, most people are more than happy and willing to help out in some way for a holy and worthy cause. Shabbat Shalom.